commercial patterns come in envelopes, and on the front of the envelope there's going to be some information that's going to tell us about the pattern and what is in there. So the first thing you're going to see is the pattern brand. So this is the Simplicity pattern. Our major brands of patterns are Simplicity, Butterick, Vogue, and McCall's. So you'll see those. You're going to have a pattern number. This one is 8605, and that just tells you the actual number that goes to the pattern that you have here. Another thing that's going to be across the top is the actual sizes that this pattern has. So patterns have multiple sizes in them. So this one is extra small to extra large. So it has extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large in there. It's also going to give you a picture of the actual garments that are in there, and then it's going to give you all of the views. So all of the different views or different patterns or garments that you can make that are included in this pattern. So there are 4 different patterns or products that you can make in this pattern. If you flip over on the back of your pattern, you're going to have more information that is provided to you for actual sewing. So again, you're going to see your number. It should be the same number that's on the front. It's going to tell you how many pieces are in this pattern. So this pattern actually contains 8 actual pattern pieces. It's going to give you the views again of what your ones are. So A, B, C, D, and then E is the sash. And then it's going to give us some information here that we're going to use for actual sewing and knowing what to buy for making our product. So it's going to tell you what it is. Then it's going to tell you the fabrics that it recommends. So batik, chambray, cottons, gingham, lightweight denim, linen. It's telling you that if you have a plaid or a stripe or a one-way design, which means that it has a nap, that it's going to take extra fabric. And the reason it's going to take extra fabric is that it takes extra fabric to match those up, those designs up, so that when you sew, they're all in the same direction and they're lined up on the body. It's going to give you your notions. Notions are anything that we need for sewing that's not our fabric. So our threads, our elastics, our trims, our closures. So it's going to tell you what you need and the size of that. And then it's going to go into the body measurements for the individual pattern sizes. So for an extra small, your bust should measure between 30.5 inches and 31.5 inches. Your waist should measure between 23 and 24 inches. Your hip should be 32.5 to 33.5. And then back neck to waist is 15.5 to 15 3/4. Your important measurements for pants or for tops are going to be your bust, your waist, and your hip. The thing about patterns versus ready-to-wear clothing is pattern sizes do not match sizes of clothing that we buy in the store. So it's very important that you take your body measurements and that you buy a pattern based off of the size that is listed on the back of the pattern envelope rather than the size that you wear in garments that you buy at the store. For a pant or a short or a skirt, the most important body measurement to go off of is your hip. So make sure the pattern is as close to your hip size as possible, and then you can adjust your waist size to match that easier. If you are purchasing a shirt or a top or a jacket, the most important measurement to go off is your bust or your chest size, and then you can adjust the other sizes to fit your body. Then the next thing it's going to tell you is how much fabric do you need based on what size you're making and based on what product you're making. So if we're going to make pants view A in an extra small, it gives us 2 measurements. We either have 2 3/8 yards or 1 7/8 yards. And the difference is the width of the fabric. So fabric comes in either 45-inch width or 60-inch width is the standard, and that's the width between the 2 selvages of your fabric. Okay. It's going to give you a lot of times your finished measurements. So this includes what we call design and wearing ease. So wearing ease is the difference in the body measurement and the actual garment size that we have to have in there so that the garment is actually comfortable to wear on our body. So our garments are slightly bigger than our actual body measurements. Design ease is any extra ease or any extra difference between the measurement of the garment and the measurement of the body that is in there to create the look of the garment, to create the shape or the silhouette that is designed or looked for in that garment. When we open our envelope, we're going to have what's considered a guide sheet. And our guide sheet is going to give us some basic information. So again, it's going to give us our pattern number, and our brand is going to give you the views again. Then if you flip it over, it's going to give you the pattern pieces. So there's 8 pattern pieces, what they look like, they're numbered, and then it's going to tell us what those are. So number 1 is the front, number 2 is the back, and that's for view A and B. Then when we open it up, it's going to give us what we call cutting layouts. So it's going to tell us how to lay out the pattern pieces on our fabric for the one that we're making. So if we're making pants view A or B, we're going to use pieces 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's going to tell you what pieces you need. And it's going to give you 45-inch fabric or 60-inch fabric. And it's going to tell you how to lay your pattern pieces out. So your fold with your selvages together, so 2 layers of fabric, and you're going to place the patterns in that order. So it's going to do that for each view based on your fabric of 45 or 60-inch width. Then it's also going to provide us with sewing directions. So after you get your pattern pieces cut out, your pattern envelope, your guide sheet, is actually going to give you step-by-step directions for actually sewing your garments together. So they'll give you an illustration of what you're supposed to do, as well as the actual directions next to that illustration for putting each of those views together. Then it's also actually going to include your actual pattern pieces. Okay. And on your pattern pieces, which are made out of a tissue paper, so they're very thin, it's going to give you the information about that pattern piece. So again, it's going to tell you the pattern number. It's going to tell you the sizes that it goes with. It's going to give you a pattern piece number. So this is going to correspond with, in the guide sheet, what number that was. It's going to tell you that it's the front and the back, and this is for view C and D. It's going to tell you how many to cut. So cut 2 on the fold. So we'll put this on the fold, cut 1, move it again on the fold, and cut another one. Some pattern pieces will actually give you finished measurements for your sizes, so what your garment should actually measure with that. Then it's going to give you your actual sewing guidelines or pattern information for actually using that pattern and laying out that pattern. So as we look at actual pattern pieces, what do some of those design pieces mean on there? So we have a line with double arrows, and you either get a straight line or you get a line where your arrow is then turned back to the edge of your fabric piece. That is your grain line. So as we are sewing, as we're laying out our pattern pieces to cut them out of the fabric, we are going to have this grain line up with the lengthwise grain of our fabric. So we want this running parallel to the selvages, following the lengthwise grain of the fabric. If the arrows are turned and come back to the edge of a piece of pattern, that means that we're actually going to lay this edge of the pattern on the fold. So a grain line with turned arrows means place on the fold. Then you have solid lines which outline the edge of your pattern piece. That is your cutting line. So your solid lines on the outside are where you're actually going to cut, following the edge of that pattern piece to cut it out of the fabric. Your dotted lines just inside of that are your stitching lines. So it tells you how big your seams are actually going to be when you're sewing your pieces together. Most seams are 5/8 of an inch unless stated otherwise when we're sewing with patterns. Then you have these triangles that you see on your pattern pieces. Those are called notches, and we have single notches and we have double notches. Occasionally you'll actually see a triple notch, which will have 3 triangles or diamond shapes with that. These are used for actually lining up pattern pieces when you go to sew. So this notch and this notch on the shoulders, when we line those shoulder seams up to sew the shoulder together, should actually line up to tell us that we have the pattern pieces placed correctly for actual stitching. A single dart many times will indicate either the front, or it's going to indicate that these are going to match up. So if we look at our sleeve, so we have the back of a sleeve here, we have the front of a sleeve here. The front has a single notch, the back has a double notch as a way of telling the front from the back. We have these triangular shapes here that have a little wedge that comes out. Those are darts, and darts are used for fitting. They're used for taking this flat two-dimensional piece of fabric and actually creating it to fit a 3-dimensional body shape. So they're used to fit over the curves of our body. And so the dotted lines there are actually our stitching lines that will actually stitch to make that triangular wedge in our fabric. We also have guidelines for placement of different elements when we are sewing. So this solid line is used, this is telling us that we're going to place a pocket here, and it's telling us that the bottom of the pocket is going to end up here, the top of the pocket is going to end up where these dots are. So dots are used for aligning pattern pieces or components together when you're not at the edge of a pattern piece. So at the edge we use notches, and within a pattern piece we use dots. The circle with the line through it is indicating those are going to be buttons. So this is telling us that our buttons are going to be placed along the front of our shirt. So buttons and buttonholes. The line represents a buttonhole. The circle represents the buttons. Solid lines within our pattern pieces are fold lines. So what this is telling us is this is a facing on the center front of our shirt. So this piece is going to fold on this line back into the main part of the shirt.